Some places are better left alone. That was the advice given to me Tuesday before I decided to take a trip to the unincorporated and supposedly satanic town of Joppa, Indiana. I've heard stories about this place before, but I'm the kind of person that has to see something to believe it, especially when it comes to haunted areas. It was a warm night last night and the moon was full and bright. The idea of spending money didn't sound fun to me, so I decided to finally pay a visit to Joppa and see if I could document some things. After trying and failing to talk any of my friends into going, I decided to just go alone since they were well aware of my whereabouts should anything happen. Before heading out, I did a little reading and found out roughly where the church would be located. The church bears no crosses or symbol of any kind and is off a graveled country back road. It was about midnight when I decided to finally leave the house and head that way. I shot a quick text to my friends letting them know I was going and would meet them at the bar if anything had happened to me that was interesting. They sent me back a text reassuring me that they'd be expecting me. After entering the address into the GPS and backing out of the driveway, I was on my way. About 3 miles away, I noticed that the streetlights seemed to no longer exist. These lonely country roads were lit up only by my high beams, as the moon had now hidden behind some clouds. Continuing down the road, I began to get a familiar butterfly feeling in my stomach. The places I've been to in the past were all supposedly haunted. This would be my first time going somewhere that has had reported cult-like activity. It was about midnight when I decided to finally leave the house and head that way. I shot a quick text to my friends letting them know I was going and would meet them at the bar if I had anything interesting to tell them. They sent me back a text reassuring me that they'd be expecting me. After entering the address into the GPS and backing out of the driveway, I was on my way. About 3 miles away, I noticed that the streetlights seemed to no longer exist. These lonely country roads were lit up only by my high beams, as the moon had now hidden behind some clouds. Continuing down the road, I began to get that familiar butterfly feeling in my stomach. The places I've been to in the past were all supposedly haunted. This would be my first time going to somewhere that has had reports of cult-like activity. I approached a stop sign and looked at my GPS. 1 mile from my destination. Looking ahead, it appeared that the road was going to be a 1 mile straight, narrow road with a couple curves at the end leading into the town and nothing but fields on both sides of the road. I pressed the gas and began driving roughly 30 miles an hour down the road. About a half mile down the road, I began to approach a slight hill in the road. Once on the other side of the hill, I noticed a pair of truck headlights coming my direction. My stomach began to drop, but I told myself it was probably just some random person going out to the store or something and that there was nothing to worry about. When the truck was about 50 yards away, it flashed its headlights twice and came to a complete stop in the middle of the road. As I continued to drive past him, I noticed the truck was higher than usual, as if some kind of lift kit had been installed on the truck. It was white with tinted windows and some rust spots. As intimidating as that was to see a truck at a complete stop on a country road, that still wasn't the worst part. The worst part was what they had hanging over the tailgate. When I looked in my rearview mirror, I saw hanging over that truck's tailgate an all-black flag with a white, upside-down cross on it. My heart began to race as all the rumors and stories I had heard about this place felt immediately validated. With my attention still on the truck, I began to notice something unusual in his behavior. He would drive up a couple of feet and then stop, and he did this a few times. I looked forward to make sure I was still on the road and going at decent speed. It wasn't until a few seconds later that I looked up again at my rear view and noticed that the truck was turning around. Right after turning around, he cut his headlights off. As I approached the curve, his lights suddenly came back on and he was getting close to my bumper. I managed to find a driveway to turn into, and he kept going past. Being alone and forgetting to bring any kind of protection, I knew I needed to get out of here. I reversed the car out of the driveway and headed back the way I came. As I threw the car into drive, I noticed the truck again turning around in my rear view and again cutting his headlights off. After I got back onto the straight part of the road, I began to speed up some since I knew it was a straight shot. Suddenly, those damn headlights were back behind me, this time flashing the high beams on and off constantly until I finally got past the stop sign from earlier. After passing the stop sign, I looked in my rear view and saw the truck pull off the road and cut off his headlights. I decided to just continue on to the bar and catch up with my friends. After I got back from the bar that night, I had trouble sleeping. I couldn't shake the thought of what they could be protecting. My imagination went wild. Was there a sacrifice happening? Was church in session? What could it possibly be? After realizing it was 5 a.m., I decided to pop a sleeping pill and call it a night. It was around 3 p.m. yesterday when I finally woke up to someone banging on my front door. In a half-panic, half-sleep, I stumbled to the door and opened it, completely forgetting I sleep naked. "Whoa, dude, put that thing away." It was my friend Brian, the same one who had warned me about Joppa. He wasn't at the bar when I arrived last night, so he had missed out on hearing the story. "My fault, you caught me off guard," I said, heading back to my room to change. Brian let himself in, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and took a seat on the couch. "So, you actually went through with it?" he asked while cracking the bottle open. "Not exactly." "What do you mean?" "Well, I got chased out when I was about a half-mile away. Probably just some back-road redneck." I grabbed a beer and sat next to him. "Maybe," I replied. "I doubt it, though." He must have noticed the look on my face. "Wait, you're not seriously thinking about going back there, are you?" he said. "You're more than welcome to join me," I said, already knowing the answer. "I would, but I have to meet Kate for that thing." Later last night, as it approached midnight, I knew it was time to go. This time, I grabbed a knife to bring with me. In case things went south. Again, I texted my friends, letting them know where I was going, should I come up missing, and headed out. I decided that I would take the same approach this time, rather than trying to find a new way in. Slowly, I approached the stop sign where the truck had stopped chasing me the other night. No sign of him. I pressed the gas and once again began my journey down the long, narrow road. As I got near the half-mile mark, I again came to the hill in the road. This time, however, I came to a complete stop at the bottom and cut off my headlights. I decided the best approach would be to get out and walk up the hill to see if the truck was down the road on the other side first. I grabbed a pair of binoculars out of the glove box and opened the door. As I walked, I noticed how eerie of a silence it was out here. I couldn't even hear the sound of crickets, which I thought was weird. I reached the top of the hill and peered through the binoculars. No sign of him. No sign of anything for that matter. I walked down the hill and got back into my car. I might actually get to see the church tonight, I thought to myself. The car began to slowly creep forward and up the hill as I put the car in drive. It was as if the town and hill were inviting me. When I got to the top of the hill, the car stopped moving. I pressed the gas and nothing happened outside of the engine noise. It was then that I noticed the car had been in neutral the whole time. I was going up the hill. Despite being unable to come up with a logical explanation, I decided to put the car in drive and keep going. At about 25 miles per hour, I continued down the road. I had the windows down and the music turned down as well, so I could hear if any truck engines came on nearby that I couldn't see. It was then that I noticed something in the road and put the car in reverse to check it out. It was graffitied in the middle of the road. It was located in the exact same spot the white truck had been parked the other night. The graffiti spelled out, "The Enforcer." I got out and took a photo of the graffiti for documentation, and then got back into the car and continued on. After going through the curves and approaching a T in the road, my GPS went off. "You have arrived at your destination." Looking out the windshield, I immediately noticed the boulder to my right with the word Joppa engraved on it. Planted in the grass next to it was an upside-down cross. Across the street from me was a group of trees. Faintly, I noticed things hanging from them, but unable to make out what it was, I threw my high beams on. I really wish I hadn't. Hanging from the trees was multiple and different animal carcasses. They were beyond mutilated. I began trying to gather myself and calm down. While catching my breath, I began to hear a slow creaking noise coming from my right. I glanced out of the passenger side window, completely unaware that there was a house next to the boulder. In the front lawn was someone slowly rocking back and forth in a rocking chair. The person was draped from head to toe in some sort of black hooded robe. It was whistling some sort of tune and giggling to itself in a deep, raspy voice. I sat there in a dead silence, just observing. Every so often, it would tilt its head back and inhale as if it was in love with the smell of those trees across the street. After a few moments, I began to reach for my cell phone to try to record. Right as my hand reached my phone, the thing suddenly stopped all movement and turned to me. It was so dark that the opening of the hood where its face would be was like an abyss. It began making a deep, growling noise at me and stood up. I quickly backed up and turned the car around. I put the car in drive and I looked in my rear view mirror to see it was still coming. It was. With the brake lights illuminating the area behind me, I noticed it start to pick something up from the lawn. It was a huge pitchfork. After picking up the pitchfork, it turned back towards the back of the car and tilted its head the same way a dog does. A few seconds later, it began a full-on sprint towards the car. I slammed the gas and got out of there. I've decided to not go back until I have multiple people with me. This is a very real place. I recommend that you take my friend Brian's advice, though, and do not go exploring there.